Okay, the materials you need are vinegar. This is plain distilled vinegar just from Walmart, white vinegar. A bowl to keep it in, a little one. This is a glass dish. A medicine dropper that goes up to a teaspoon that you're going to use to suck the vinegar out to put into the dye solution. A bowl for pre-soaking the fiber. I'll get to that in a minute. Measuring spoons. This is an eighth, a quarter, and a half of a teaspoon, and this is a quarter and a half. These are just a different kind that I had. Doesn't matter what kind you use as long as they're consistent. You always use the same ones. Dawn dish liquid, the blue, the original. You put a couple of drops into the soak for the fiber. Helps it prepare to take the dye. This is a ketchup bottle. I got at a restaurant supply store for about $1. These are for putting the dye on the fiber if you choose to spot or space dye. Paper towels for mistakes. The fiber, obviously, these are each 4-ounce bundles of superwash BFL that have not yet soaked. A very large turkey roaster. It's like 14 by 20, I think. It'll fit in the oven just barely. Dye packets. I have a whole bunch. This is just one to show you. The dye recipe, if it's a colorway you've done before, or at least write it down so you kind of know what you're doing. You can do this as you go. This is just a 3.5 by 5 index card, but you will get that wet because your hands will be wet. And a bamboo skewer that I use to stir the dye in the mix. Also, not pictured here, ran out of room, a 4-cup Pyrex glass measuring cup and a 1 cup as well for smaller amounts. Hot water, you'll need a lot of hot water. I heat it on the stove in a big pan almost to boiling. And I don't know if you can see it. That's the pan. It's a very large pan. And once the bubbles start to form on the bottom, I turn that off and it stays nice and hot so that the dye will dissolve. I'm going to fill the white bowl with hot water, a couple of drops with the blue Dawn. Don't swish it around, don't make it suds, just give it a little bit of a flick so it doesn't sit on the bottom. And then soak the BFL in the hot water until it's really good and soaked, anywhere from 5 minutes to 20, depending on how long it takes you to mix your dye. So I'm going to do that now. I now have 4 cups of hot water in the Pyrex glass container. I need to put 4 teaspoons of vinegar in so that the dye, when I put the dye in here, the dye will absorb into the fiber. I've already done 3, so that's the 4th one. That's a ratio of about a teaspoon of vinegar for every 8 ounces of water. So I've got 4 cups, so I have 4 teaspoons of vinegar. The dye solution that I'm going to use, the dye color, is 2 packets of dye, actually, a 3-to-1 ratio. So I'm going to do 3 of these and 1 of these. So I'm going to do 3/8 of a teaspoon, or I'm going to use the 1/4 teaspoon and the 1/8. So there's 1. That was the 1/8. I'm going to use the 1/4. There's 3 of that color, 3/8. And 1/8 of this one. Now normally I make sure that the teaspoon, they're all wiped off, but these 2 colors are very close. So I am just going to stick that back in there. 1/8 of a teaspoon. That goes in there as well. Now is the time when bamboo stirring stick, also known as a kebab skewer, I'm going to mix that all up. The ketchup bottles that I have, I'm just going to set on the paper towel and very slowly and gently fill them up. You don't have to do it this way. There are other ways to dye. I want as much control as possible for this particular colorway. So I'm going to space dye and spot dye, which is that I'm going to use these ketchup bottles to apply the dye to the fiber. You can kettle dye. You can put this all in a pot and put the fiber in with it, and you'll get a semi-solid color. you can put all the fiber in a pan and then pour the dye on top of it. It's all personal choice. There are no wrong ways to do this. So I'm going to put the covers on because they spill less quickly if you knock them over that way. And you can see these are 12-ounce ketchup bottles, so I have 2 and then I have a half. That frees up my 4-cup measuring cup so that I can start the next color. So there's the blue. Refilled the Pyrex glass with 4 cups of that very hot water. Real quick, I'm going to add 4 teaspoons of vinegar. Important step not to forget. Ask me how I know. And then, because this is just one dye packet, it's not a blend, I'm just going to pour half of a teaspoon into the 4 cups of hot water. Now, stir that up. You can use the other side of the stick if you want, but the color doesn't tend to bleed that much for me, so I just stick the same end of that bamboo skewer in and start to stir it. The fiber has been soaking in the sink. You can see it's absorbed a lot of the water, and it's been there about 10 minutes, so it's ready to go. Now, the fiber needs to go in the pan, and you want to lay it out as loosely as possible. You don't want to jam it in there too much because the dye will have trouble absorbing. You very gently, let me show you, this is my bowl with the fiber in it. Especially for non-superwash fibers, you want to be very careful about the way you handle them because they will felt. Generally, you don't want them to drip on. I would be putting them in the other sink, but just to show you how much water that they hold. You want to let that drain. You can use a salad spinner. Some people use the wash machine to spin them dry. I am just going to very gently squeeze this because this is superwash and it won't felt. Okay, so here are my 3 bundles. They're wet, but they're not dripping. They have absorbed enough water to help take the dye, but they don't have so much water in them that the dye won't take. Okay, now I have my fiber laid flat out in the pan with as much exposed as possible. I'm probably a good knuckle deep into this pan, but we're going to be able to move it around a little bit. If you're just experimenting with this, I would definitely use superwash fiber because you don't have the added worry of it felting, how about? And that can be a big help. So, we're now ready to dye now. This table is not actually level, and the dye is going to tend to go this way. So I'm going to start down here with the darkest color, and then I'll put the lighter color up here. You don't want the dark to go over the light. So, ketchup bottle, I check to make sure that the lid's on tight. And all you do is tip it over and start to squirt. I try to work evenly across one side of the fiber. At least as far as I know, I should be able to get all 3 skeins the same saturation. For fiber, I don't mind if there's a little bit of white left because as you spin, it will add depth to the color, which is a bonus in spinning. You can at this point take the fiber and flip it over, and you can see that the dye did not take up on the other side. This is a high strike dye, so that basically the dye stays wherever you squeeze it on, and it doesn't filter down through the roving, or the top as this is. So I kind of handle it a little bit. Make sure it's nice and solidly colored in. Fiber is a lot more forgiving than people think. Alright, now I'm going to start on the other side. You can rinse your hands if you want. Mine don't look too bad, so I'm just going to go with it. I'm leaving a big chunk here that is undyed. I'm choosing not to dye the middle spot. It's just going to be 2 colors. It's going to be this dark blue and this gold yellow. Same deal, you go across. That's our finished 3 bundles, so 12 ounces of fiber. I put the dark blue over here, an undyed section where you can see some colors have kind of started to bleed a little bit, and then the gold, orangey yellow color. What I'm going to do now is set this to bake in the oven. This is just a piece of tin foil, nothing special. I set it over the top so that just in case one of the coils in the oven is very, very hot, it won't scorch the yarn. I just lay it right on top, 175 degrees for about 45 minutes. And I'll show you what happens after that.